all the parts that we need to make Earth systems function are being run by microbes. They're the little engines that are making everything go.
What would you share to your students that first got into this field?
I think the most important thing that somebody starting out on this topic should know is how little we know.
So that is the strength of the nature, to realize how little humans are.
If you add up all of the microbial cells in all of the world's oceans and underneath all of our sediments, there's more of them than there are stars in the universe.
How's the environment be like in the deep sea? Was it just full of darkness or just like colorful?
This is the complete absence of light. If there is any light in the deep sea, it's not coming from the sun, it's coming from animals.
Talking of Hainan, what could Hainan do to get into this field of study?
Hainan is already in this field of study, so it's amazing to come back here and see that there were 2 manned submersibles that were built here in China and primarily here in Hainan.
自贸家邀请您关注本期对话嘉宾田纳西大学诺克斯维尔分校教授、上海交通大学深部生命国际研究中心学术委员会联合主席凯伦。作为全球唯一的国际性深海与深部生物圈模拟研究平台，深部生命国际研究中心是如何聚焦蔚蓝深海，拓展研究新方法，填补深部生物圈领域的研究空白。从美国到中国，潜入跳动中的蓝色心脏，凯伦教授又是如何带领团队贡献专业力量，解密海量海洋深部生命的长期生存策略？风正千帆竞，海南又将如何向海图强打造蓝色新引擎，助力海洋强国战略，发挥不可替代的海南作为？自贸家正在播出。
Hey Karen,
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Welcome
you.
to Hainan.
Yeah, thanks.
Very first question is that in the very beginning, deep life and marine microbes they're really new terms for me, and I believe that so are them to most of our audience. So could you please tell us something about deep life?
Well, the first thing to know is that they are present everywhere in the oceans. There's no depth where life goes away. It goes all the way through the entire depth of the ocean. And because it's so hard to get to, they're very mysterious down there. We are only starting to learn what their functions are.
How does it relate to our lives?
To our lives, this is most commonly because these form the base of the ecosystem that supports our fisheries. So that's usually how we interact with the ocean, is that we eat what comes from the ocean. But what's happening in these deep ecological communities impacts what we eat. So it's very important to learn about these deep communities. And it also matters for climate change, because as we look for solutions for our dependence on fossil fuels, we are looking to things that happen in the deep sea and in deep underneath the Earth's crust, and we need to know what types of microbes are there because they may help us to sequester carbon.
And where do they live? In the mud or in the water?
They live everywhere.
Everywhere.
There's no place that we've gone in the oceans or underneath the oceans and we have not found life. They're everywhere. We have found that there are microbes that are new branches on the tree of life that we never knew existed before. Just whole new sections of all of life on Earth that we would not have known if we did not go to the deep sea. But we found them in hydrothermal vents, which are these deep subsea floor. They look like volcanoes. We can find them where there's methane coming out of the seafloor. There's another important thing to know about the subsurface or the deep sea is that it's not just one place. There's many different types of environments, and each one has a different type of microbial population living there.
So you also need to go to the volcanoes?
Yeah, right.
Are there any differences between when you go to the volcanoes or when you go into the deep sea?
Yeah, we think that there are, but that's the kind of questions that we're asking right now. These places are so remote. We often have to work with such small amount of samples that we're just starting to answer some very basic questions about these exciting ecosystems. And I think the most important thing, actually the heat and the high pressure that these organisms often experience, those aren't really even the big problems. The question is, where do they get their energy from? What kind of chemicals are present that support their lives?
Mm-hmm. When you're doing your lecture, like one-on-one starting lecture, what would you share to your students that first got into this field?
I think the most important thing that somebody starting out on this topic should know is how little we know. I mean, that is just, I cannot overemphasize this point, because there's so much that we have to discover. Every time we go to the bottom of the ocean, we find something new, every single time. So it's an exciting field to be in and to be starting out in, especially if you're a starting out scientist, because there's more questions than there are answers.
How would they say after taking your lecture about this topic? Yeah.
They would say, I wish I got a better grade.
Really?
That's usually what they tell me.
A plus?
Yeah, some of them do get A pluses, but I think they would come with an understanding of how Earth's elemental cycles are really being driven by biology. That life, that microbes in the ocean are responsible for iron cycling, for carbon cycling, nitrogen, sulfur, all the parts that we need to make Earth systems function are being run by microbes. They're the little engines that are making everything go.
Mm-hmm. So that is the strength of the nature, to realize how little human are.
Yeah, that's true. It puts us into perspective for sure. All we do is breathe oxygen. That's it. Yeah. We don't even breathe uranium. Mm-hmm. They do.
They are stronger than we do?
In some ways. They're certainly not bigger, but if you add up all of the microbial cells in all of the world's oceans and underneath all of our sediments, there's more of them than there are stars in the universe. So it's literally an astronomical amount of organisms down there.
2023年6月 Karen Lloyd 教授正式担任上海交通大学深部生命国际研究中心学术委员会联合主席，进一步深化该中心在研究、教育等各方面的国际合作。同年10月2023深部生命国际研究中心学术研讨会在海南三亚牙洲湾科技城举行，聚集来自中国、美国、德国等100余名研究者，围绕深部生命和地球化学循环、深部生命研究新技术等专题进行探讨，为深部生命国际研究学科的发展贡献中外合作力量。
And could you give us some briefing about what you're bringing here to this forum?
Yeah, I talked about some work that we've done in the deep sea and underneath the deep sea, actually, in the muck, in the mud that's underneath the oceans. We drill down deep into that and then ask the question, what's living down there? What's it like? What I was saying in my speech yesterday is that we're finding that most of the microbial life that's down there is very different than anything that we've seen before. We can quantify how different it is and see that it's so different that we can't even take a guess about what it's like or what it does or anything like that. And so we have to use special chemical techniques to try to figure out how it lives and how it contributes to these ecosystems.
Yeah, and one thing I think is interesting that we know that the ocean is the origin of life, but the particles, the microbes, they have lived about tens of millions of years in a deep ocean. Yeah. But are they so important now?
Well, I don't know that we know that the origin of life is in the oceans.
All right.
I think that's a good guess. It's probably our best guess, so that's a good assumption, but I think we always have to remember that other possibilities exist. The ones that we're finding in some of these marine sediments, as far as we can tell, seem to be very, very long-lived. Like the lifespan of a single cell, living cell in these environments can be hundreds of years, thousands of years, possibly even tens or hundreds of thousands of years, which is hard to imagine for us, but it seems possible for them.
How could they contribute to our understanding of life, our understanding of the human's development?
Yeah, I think that we should not make the assumption that an individual only lives for 100 years. And so when we look at this life, we have to say, how does this happen? You know, how do you have an adaptation that allows something to live for that long? And I think that we have a lot to learn when you find a new type of organism that's doing something different than what you've ever seen before. When you start to learn how they do it, you learn things that can apply to human life. For instance, one thing that we are starting to see is that they have very stable proteins. And humans have a long history of using proteins from the microbial world for our own processes. So we use yeast proteins to make beer and wine. You know, we use all these catalases and hydrolases. We put them in laundry detergent. There's enzymes that we use from the microbial world. Well, the ones that are in the deep sea, if it's true that they're more stable, then maybe we should be using those, and then our products will last longer. I mean, that's sort of like just one example, but I think when you
that's
find
practical.
That's a practical example, and that's not the major driving reason why we're doing this research.
Sure,
you know?
but that helps us to understand this topic more. Yeah.
And that's true for anything in science. When you crack into a whole new world, you don't know what you're going to get out of it. So just the fact that it's new and different is the reason why you want to do it.
In your past experiences, I'm really curious about how's the environment be like in the deep sea. Was it just full of darkness, or just like colorful as we've imagined, or we can see in the film?
This is the complete absence of light, like literally nothing. And so that's a given. Until we get down there with our submarines and then submersibles, and then we light everything up. But when we turn the lights on in these places, often all the animals will just come in and be like, what is this? What's going on?
Because it has a light on, right?
Yeah, they're attracted to light. And they themselves very often make their own light. So if there's any light in the deep sea, it's not coming from the sun, it's coming from animals. Do you know how submersibles work? Like how you get down? You fall. So basically, they drop you, you load up a submersible with humans, you close the hatch, and then a big, powerful crane takes the entire submersible filled with people and puts it into the ocean and lets it go. And then it just falls. And so you fall to the bottom of the ocean, and while you're falling, you can look out the porthole, and as you hit all the animals, you bump into them, they fluoresce, they bioluminesce, and so it looks like stars going past the window. It's beautiful.
It must be beautiful.
The ocean is full.
Yeah, because I think people need to know a lot about how the marine microbes and deep life are related to the human's life, and that's what they do right now.
Yeah, and we go there to them.
近5年，三亚牙洲湾科技城发挥气候温度、海洋深度、地理纬度3大优势和自贸港政策优势，加快打造种业、深海、航天、陆海空3大未来产业。深海产业目前已汇聚中国科学院深海科学与工程研究所等科研机构及1500多家海洋产业类企业，形成了政产学研用创新全链条。
Talking of Hainan, what could Hainan do to get into this field of study?
Hainan is already in this field of study, very much. There's really exciting work going on here. So it's amazing to come back here and see what everybody's been doing for the past couple of years, because I didn't realize that there were 2 manned submersibles that were built here in China, and primarily here in Hainan.
And Hainan has its own submarine thing.
Yes.
And that's a really vital resource for them.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive technology. But beyond just the technology, I mean, the researchers here are doing cutting edge work in finding about these microbes. So we work sort of in parallel. The work that I'm doing in the United States is very similar to the work that's being done here in China. That we're all pushing the science forward so that we all discover new things. So it's really important that we get young people excited about doing this kind of research. And it's hard. It's a difficult type of work to do. But if we show people how exciting it is and get them interested in this work, then the whole field will continue. So it's incredibly important to have the young people involved and to take them to sea and to get them to dive in submersibles. It's hard to replace the excitement of actually going down to the bottom of the ocean. And I've never been to the absolute bottom of the ocean.
And where's the deepest place you've ever been?
Myself? My deepest dive is in the Guaymas Basin, which is in the Gulf of California, which is like on the west coast of Mexico. And I dove to 2,000 meters.
And tell us more about that story, please.
It's a very small space. So it's a titanium sphere, and you've got 3 people in it, 1 pilot and 2 scientists. And you're all sitting in the space of like maybe just these chairs and closer actually, and you're just there all day long.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, pretty much. So you have to be nice and respectful. But there's two robotic arms the pilot uses the arms to run our experiments for us, to take cores, to gather mud, and to bring back samples. And so the two scientists we each have our own. I would have a porthole here, and the other one would have a porthole there, and the pilot has the front porthole. You have to monitor those portholes to see what's going on. And so it's my job to be pointing out what we see at the seafloor and say, hey, there's something over there that we need to go get. You spend all day and all your senses are just occupied.
And your trip to the deep sea, that sounds really like a space trip, like astronauts. But the different thing is that you can see many animals around you.
Yeah.
And I think the study to the universe and the study to the deep sea, they are somehow similar to each other.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of connections between the study of the deep sea and the study of space. And the reason, or at least life in space, and the reason is that for us to imagine that there's life on another planet or on another moon or on another asteroid or anything, we have to imagine that it's possible. And if we didn't know about the strange life that lives on Earth, we may not be able to think it's possible. But every time we go to a strange place on Earth, like a volcano or the deep sea or these places that don't seem normal. They don't seem like where you should expect to find life. When we go there, we're like, oh, there's tons of life. And so because that's true on Earth, I think it is likely that it's also true elsewhere. And we know, because we're studying these types of life, we can look at how that's possible, like what makes that possible. How does an organism live in a place that's so different from our experience?
And that is a trip full of surprise.
Yeah, right.
And now after years of study, have you changed any understanding of human or life?
Life.
Yeah, life.
I don't know anything about humans. I don't know.
Right.
Yes, I think we've absolutely changed our understanding of life on Earth, just simply because we thought that there was less life than there was. And it's not just the total number, it's the type of life. I mean, we're finding these deep branches, and that puts us into perspective. Humans only appeared very recently in Earth's history. So the vast majority of the life on Earth and the diversity of life on Earth is microbial. And it's hard to see and it's hard to know about. But once we start looking for it, we're finding that it puts us into a very small perspective.
What's your expectation of your study in the future?
I think given all the great discoveries that we've made, when we continue to explore the deep ocean and we continue to look in places that we haven't looked before because everything is so mysterious, I think we're going to make discoveries that are just as big as what we've made in the past. And I can't even imagine what they're going to be. And that's the exciting part. Like, it's going to be something great, but I don't know what it is. We just have to look.
Full of unknown.
Yeah, unknown unknowns. Exactly. Lots of those.
Why do you choose this field to study?
I think one is that I really like adventure. I like to go to places that are hard to get to. That's just an important part of my life. And this field of study is a way to do that. And I also am attracted to areas where we just have big questions, just big unknowns. We're asking really basic questions about this ecosystem, and that's fun for me.
But that's really far from our lives.
Yeah. And that's good too. Just like something that's like right at the edge of what's possible with life is really, I can't stop thinking about it. I'm like obsessed with it.